Hello, everybody, and welcome to our after action review, whatever I'm calling this version of TLDC. Today we have Lisa Crockett, who a lot of you longtime TLDCers know. She's very active with TLDC for a long time, and then luckily got busy with work, and so hasn't been on as much lately. So I grabbed her back in and snagged her to do this with me. So Lisa, do you want to give just a brief intro of who you are, what you're working on now, what's keeping you so busy?
Oh, sure. So I'm a jack of all trades. Actually, I don't know what to call myself, and I still struggle with that. Learning strategist, learning designer, video aficionado. I love to make things, and I love to have fun and do all the stuff involved in learning, which kind of makes me hard to peg for a job. Right now, what I'm doing is putting together a boot camp for an ad tech agency. They bring in software engineers, so I am helping them build this 4-week boot camp that is so out of my wheelhouse and so much fun. It's amazing. Not a lot of creation going on, a lot of identification. And these folks like it simple, so it's forcing me to take a step back because I love to gamify things and I love to make any kind of sort of fun video, fun. You guys have seen some of the stuff I put out or shared with you. So this is good for me to sort of rein it back in and recognize that we have a lot of fun tools that we can use, but we don't always need to use them. We need to meet the learner where they are and need to meet the performance need where it is. So it's interesting, and it's really my first gig as a freelancer in the last year that's been like this, and it's good to get my feet back on the ground.
Yes. So you moved to freelance work. It was about a year ago?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I was doing learning design for a company learning design, sort of a whole lot of different things in that area and in professional development and HR before that for the last 10 years, and finally decided to stop talking about doing something on my own and do it.
That's great. I like it when a TLDC person moves to freelance, because I know a lot of people in the chat and generally a TLDC are always kind of teetering on that edge of when do I do it? Should I do it now?
It's challenging. It's challenging, and it's a roller coaster. Yeah. So you have to be ready, and even when you're ready, you're not ready. You know, every other week I'm looking for another job. I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe I should put a resume out there. It's hard. But it's great when you get to take a day to yourself or get to do something for yourself that maybe you wouldn't feel comfortable doing when you work for somebody else. So
after this, I'm going to go to the sushi place for lunch and do some work there. And then I'm going to get a manicure and pedicure for my sister-in-law's wedding.
Exactly. I do that on Fridays sometimes, like half day Friday, go for a mani-pedi every other week or so, and just go, you know what, I can't afford this anymore like I used to be able to, but I'm still going to do it. And I enjoy it 10 times more than when I could actually afford it.
Yeah. And I'm also going to be up until 1 or 2 in the morning again, working on the LMS implementation. So
there you go.
Balance.
Exactly. And isn't it nice? Like, that's the other thing about this, is setting your hours. If I want to spend a few hours and enjoy an afternoon, like hopefully today will be, I'll work till 10 to 2, and nobody needs to know that. And it's quiet in my house and it's great focus time.
Exactly.
Yep. So lots of coffee.
So we wanted to talk today, for any of you who have not joined one of the casts that I produce. Typically we walk through one project, talk about the genesis of that project, how it became what it became, what it looks like, and then what you learned from that process. So we're talking today about a project that you worked on, Lisa, at not as a freelancer, inside of a company.
Correct.
So what was the ultimate performance goal of the project?
Oh gosh, that is such a loaded question, because nobody knew when they started. So my team came onto this. I worked for, I want to say it was the digital or the learning creation team. So we had learning facilitation, that was for sales training. I know a lot of you guys have probably seen it set up that way. And then we had learning design. And often the sales training team would go off and they would do their sales training stuff. And they were amazing with sales training. So let me preface with that. But people would often come to them with non-sales issues, customer service being one of them. There are sales issues to that, right? If you're talking about salespeople and delivering to that very specific audience in front of them. But when you think of it, and when you're in a corporation, you think of it in a bigger scale, it's very, very different. And you need to have an approach across not just your salespeople, but across your IT people and your medical. For us, we were a health insurance company. Sorry, I almost said the name. A health insurance company. And we had customer service was everywhere. We had members that were getting service providers, internal customers, right? IT to us to marketing, all sorts of different things going on, and all sorts of different performance issues. So the challenge here, and Kristen, you and I talked about this, this came to my team, and it was baked. It was half-baked, maybe a quarter-baked, actually. What had happened was it had come to the leader of the sales training team who thought, I'm going to go and I'm going to buy something off the shelf, and I know it's going to work. I honestly don't know the thought process behind it. I know that the needs analysis, I asked to see it and couldn't. It made it challenging at best, and the product that was bought actually didn't fit any of our customers. It was, some of you may have actually heard this fantastic program for hospitals, and it's called iCare, I-C-A-R-E. It's for hospitals. It's for bedside service. It's awesome. But we don't do any bedside service. We didn't have anyone who did that day to day. We had assessment nurses that went out once or twice a year for our members. That was it. We didn't tell our providers how to work. And certainly the sales team did not need eye care training. So we weren't quite sure why the investment was made, but it was brought to us and we were asked to figure out a way to use it. And I'm sure a lot of you have had that figure out a way to use what we bought moment. And you think, what do I do with this? Thankfully, like the general premises and the basis of eye care and the way that you approach care, it can be adapted to pretty much anything. So very little of the original program remained by the time we were finished. But the concepts and the framework was something we worked off of and maximized for lots of different audiences. So coming back to the original question, what's the performance goal? We kind of had to back into that, which is not the way I would ever approach training. But we looked at who our audiences were and what did we need to do. And the biggest strategic issue we had was actually the way that we cared for our customer service toward our members. So we started looking at, well, what are our scores for customer service? So the company, just to sort of back up, performance, how we were paid was based on how we did. If our members rated us high, we got paid more. If our members rated us low, we got paid less, because it was a Medicaid, or is a Medicaid Medicare program primarily. So if we're not getting returns because our customer service scores are low, we don't have money to keep the company running. We can't keep people employed. So that was our first approach in terms of performance and strategy, is how do we improve those scores? Then we had to look at the groups inside of the company and why were we failing from a customer service perspective internally. And the first customer that came to us didn't come to us so much with complaints about the service they were experiencing, but about the clients, and that was our IT group. So I know a lot of you can relate to this, and I know I can relate to this having done LMS service in the past. When people come to you because something's not working, they're pissed. They're not friendly, they're not happy, and they expect it to be fixed like that. And the higher up the food chain you go in a corporation, the worse that can get. And that's what our IT people were experiencing. So they were asking for customer service training from a consistency perspective, but not so much because they felt they weren't doing a good job and performing well, but they knew that we needed to do something as a company to get everyone on the same page. So this training became not only how do you do this, but also how do you be a recipient of customer service? And so that we integrated into it as well, because you can get the nicest person on the phone. And I can tell you this, and I'll just be open about who I am. When I'm really angry, I am not pleasant. And it doesn't matter all the time if the other person on the phone is not at fault. I've actually apologized to people. before I open my mouth and complain, which I'm sorry, I know this is not your fault, but I need this working. This morning, Kristen and I, this didn't happen the way it could have. If it was a bad day, Kristen and I actually couldn't get onto Crowdcast this morning to test. It was down as of about a half an hour before this went off. Now I'll tell you, like a year and a half ago, when I still worked for a company and I was constantly stressed out, I would have probably called somebody screaming, I have a webcast, I have to be on it, what the hell, I work from home. Like, let's say it was the electric down or the cable down, or, you know, I wouldn't have been nice, and it wouldn't have been that person's fault. We often experience this when we're trying to give service. So having to come at it from both sides is how we sort of landed from an internal perspective. So again, what was the performance goal? Get more money, do a better job so that the company can keep moving and serving our members. Internally, get less people to quit, complain, work better together, more synergy, all through the lens of customer service. So lofty, lofty goals.
Well, that should, I think, generally be the performance goal, is make more money.
Make more money.
There are very few
keep you employed.
That eventually, once you get to the you know, level 4, level 5, it's always going to be make more money.
Yes.
But I actually like the silver lining of this, which is you ended up with a course on bedside care and thought, well, this, maybe there's some like kernel of truth in this. And if you were developing a customer service program from scratch, you may not have come up with bedside care as the right corollary, the right lens to look at it through. So I really like, it's kind of this take inspiration from wherever you can get it. We, my company, we do a lot of design thinking exercises, and a lot of them are leaving, doing something that seems completely unrelated, and then bringing back, you know, you write down 5 things you see that start with the letter C. And then when you're stuck later, you have those on sticky notes and you just put them up and you see what connections you can draw from that. So that's kind of in a much more expensive way for the company. What you guys did is like, hey, here's a tangentially related thing. See how this might influence what you could do.
I mean, well, metaphor is the most powerful way to teach, right? So when we approach, the one thing I will say, it made the subject matter expert challenge much less of a challenge. So I know Tim Slade, right? He talks about the 5 different kinds of subject matter experts. How do we deal with them? And we've all had those subject matter experts. But what I found that was very different about this was because we could give them examples, really clear examples of where we wanted them to go with it. They were able to use the metaphor to like extrapolate from it. And it wasn't just trying to answer questions that maybe were not resonating with them, especially because the groups were so very different, right? I mean, one day we're talking to IT SMEs, another day we're talking to nursing SMEs, telephonic care management nurses, right? Another day we're talking to, you know, someone in our sales, literally in our sales team. So having those examples and having something to start with, that was a good solid base. I mean, iCare did like I said, a tremendous job with the foundation. So how do you pull from that, keep it simple, and keep your subject matter experts engaged long enough to get what you need, and then land on time?
I think that I like that a lot. And what you were doing, creating one customer service training that everyone in the company could benefit from?
Okay, I'm sorry, that was a question. I heard you. The way it started, I heard it differently, and I was going to say, well, not exactly. So yeah, it was one customer service training as a base. Okay. And then what we did was we customized it for each group. So we started out with a very simple base, and we started, funnily enough, we didn't start with the first group we wanted to attack. And well, not funny, right? We all know if you do agile development, right? We started with, frankly, the smallest group. So our beta was IT, because it was the smallest group in the company to get trained, and the easiest group to get engaged because they really had a lot of skin in the game. So we started with them, and then we built from there. We went to clinical, which was those were our big thoughts next. And it was the same base. And they were actually able to see the examples within the company, which our clinical team very much understood the challenges that IT was having. They're telephonic nurses, social workers, remote, virtually, located all around the country. So they were having those challenges. So those SMEs related very much to the examples, both in the clinical, which we originally had, the hospital setting, and then the IT setting. So they benefited from that. And then the next group, which was sales, benefited from being able to talk about how care management serves the customer, how we work internally, and then those bedside pieces resonated with them as well. So it all just kind of kept moving. And we were lucky that way. We often said in our OD team, the bigger team, we came up with some really great solutions by accident. And if anybody knew how accidental half of them were, our reputation would not have been what it was. It was, but they were so lucky. I often also don't think there are coincidences, right? If you're working smart and you're asking the right questions, and you will connect the dots. So I think that's what was happening, but it was so organic that we didn't even know we were doing it. And often we'd be like, how did we pull that off? How did that even happen? And it did every time. It just kept, not that we never failed. There were plenty of failures, but the whole, like I said, the synergy of the whole thing was just wow.
Yeah. It's a good example of, you don't have to find the exact right solution. You can find the solution that works with the constraints that you have. So let's see the end result. So we should say, while you pull that up, it is anonymized. So, or genericized, I don't know.
Genericized.
So you had gotten permission from the company to strip their name out of it, obviously, and then post it on a link that is not publicly accessible, but can be shared with clients on things like this, which I also wanted to share and highlight because that's something that we talk about a lot in the Slack everywhere. How do you create a portfolio when all of your best stuff is stuff you made at a company and you don't own it? So this is a really good example.
Sorry, my fault. My first time screen sharing on here. That was just me. It's totally user error. I had this funny message come up and it said click. Okay, it said click to close and I clicked the X. Okay, there we go. So you guys can see this now? Yeah. And okay, so actually let me look at I'm actually looking at it in two places. It's very confusing. Okay. So this is our corporate customer service program, and basically what I've outlined here from a portfolio perspective for my clients, and this is exactly what I do with them. What I'm doing with you guys is walking them through the page to different level of detail depending on what they've come to me for and what they're looking for, but sort of just taking them through like how did we get here and where did we land, all the way from the development side of it to how do we deliver it and then how do we sustain it. So coming into this, none of this is going to be earth-shattering for you guys, but the marriage of Addie and Sam, sort of how did we come at development of this, really coming at it very traditionally at first, and then the successive approximation came in every time we approached a different group. And then within that group, also as part of the sustainability, we have built in plans to not only inside of the, not only do your evaluation and your assessment after, but because we built this into their performance plans and we also do regular surveys, we talk about how we can improve the program. So what did you, how much value did you get out of the program? How are you using it? What could be improved? What have you learned since the program? So we have that successive approximation, that sustainability, both from the course to course perspective, and then also from a higher level program perspective. And then as we move down, basically what we ended up starting with for every group gets the same sample intro module, and that really talks about why we're doing it. And I actually let me flip tabs over here. It's the same module for everybody. And I'm going to turn this volume off.
And actually, I want to do a quick level set. So it's e-learning. Thank you. I'll take this.
So e-learning is a start. So it's actually e-learning and workshops, plus meetings and workshops post with managers to train managers to sustain the program, because training, we all know training's just training. And all of the practical stuff's practical, that's great. how is the leader then moving into the execution after the training session, and making sure that they keep moving and talking about the principles and really thinking about how they're being implemented in practice.
Okay, so the beginning of it is e-learning, then they move to the live instruction workshops,
right,
and then continued support from managers. And you had mentioned that the managers were really valuable and really helpful with this. It's not just a piece of paper that stayed on their desk that
oh no,
they're
rated on what they're doing as part of their own performance if they're part of this program, because we've given them a week-to-week sustainability plan. We start them with they can use a 6-week or a 12-week, and they can even expand it to 24 given the number of exercises we've developed. And the exercises aren't exercises, and they are basically, you know, if you're doing a team meeting every week, which we insisted on, you're asking one question one week that you want answered the next week, and it's, how did you apply X principle, or how did you see this applied? So it's not, we're not giving them work to do, we're asking them to observe themselves and each other and then talk about it. And we're asking the managers to continually drive those conversations and giving them a structure to do it with, so that we're not leaving them on their own to think about it. And those ideas, we hope, inspire other ideas, right? So once they've exhausted the 24 ideas, they could certainly start back at the beginning, because there's so many concepts they can cover with each question, or they can come to us and we would develop more. Although I want to say I left, actually it was right after we delivered the train the trainer for this and had gotten through our beta with IT and half of our clinical when I left. So I don't know from a perspective, you know, if they came back and asked for more, and how that went. I wish I could tell you guys that. I would love to know that. But I left, and then my partner, who I was actually responsible for most of the live learning development and training the live facilitators and live virtual facilitators, because this was delivered both in a classroom for people that were in an office, and then virtually for people that were not in an office, which was a whole challenge unto itself and a lot of fun, which I know Joe could relate to. And then, you know, I would like I said, and then, sorry, back up. And then I had a partner who really did most of the e-learning. Okay. So together we worked in tandem to make sure that those things were consistent and that they flowed between each other.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to get a sense of the overall structure of the system.
And I know I probably just went on a lot longer than I needed to, Kristen. I'm a little bit
I haven't cut you off yet, so you're good.
Okay, cool. I wasn't sure because I can't really see you anymore because you're like in the corner of the screen over here.
Oh yeah.
I told Kristen to like cut me off if I talk too much, and I can't see the chat. So if you guys are letting me know, I can't see it. So yeah, so that was really how we worked through it. And you can see these are just some of the assets that we had. We had e-learning assets for each piece. Those were prerequisites. You could not come into a live or virtual classroom if you did not complete those. They were not long, 5 to 7 minutes a piece, literally very short. So there was no reason not to. We did some on-the-job tools. So I'm still stunned when I'm asked for paper. I don't know if anyone else is, and it's just, I'm so used to digital, but folks wanted references for their desks. So that's the one I'm pointing to now. And then we did the same reference, only expanded it actually a good bit because we could with using Rise, which I love. So they have a digital way to get to all of this information, and actually more, really more scenario based in here than you could possibly put on the front and back of a sheet, because everyone in that company wanted a one-pager. I was so tired of hearing that. We created videos for the live and virtual to, this was one of my favorite things to do actually. And Kristen, I think I promised the link, and of course I forgot to take it so I can put it in the chat. But I will send it to you afterwards, so maybe we can send it to everybody. Not that it's anything phenomenal. Oh, that's right, the Slack. I have got to get back in the Slack. We created some videos that we thought would, for each audience got a different video compilation. These are all things you've seen before. There are clips from commercials, movies, very short clips of good and bad customer service. And where this really, really helped us was in the live classrooms, more so than the virtual classrooms. I find it's easier if you, it can be easier to engage virtual people without necessarily going to video, because it's more of it's kind of, for me anyway, easier to get them talking or chatting about a question rather than looking at something. But in a classroom, when they're walking through the door, I often, especially when it's customer service, I see the eyes rolling or the why am I here's. And we wanted to sort of get them engaged from the minute they walked in. So we created these videos as a way, as they walked in, we started them 10 minutes before the class, ran them on a loop until 5 or 6 minutes in when we were ready and everyone was seated. And they're shocking, they're surprising, they're funny, they're sad, and they're all clipped together very quickly, and some of them a little shockingly, although they made me take the most shocking one out. But what happened was people walked in and they couldn't believe we were showing them this. It was am I really hearing, they made me cut the profanity clip from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which is my favorite. But we still got to leave some of the stuff in that was really funny, and people were just surprised that we were going to show something so bad, so humorous, so, and they sat down and watched it. And so we had them right there.
Was this something where you wanted people, you had activities in the course or in the live workshop where you needed people to be open and honest and engage and be open with their flaws? And do you think the videos helped set that stage?
I think for some groups, yes. For other groups, it was still challenging. It depends. Like for IT, I know it. I mean, I was in the room. I taught the class the first time around with my partner, and it was amazing because they just couldn't believe we were laughing at ourselves. And you know what? When you come at this from an HR background and you've run an HR department and you're willing to say the stuff that no one else is willing to say is true and laugh at yourself, I think that also makes a big difference. And one of the things I encourage my facilitators to do is to find that place that's authentic for them. Not everybody led an HR group and can laugh at the silliness and the ridiculousness of it. And if any of my peers and colleagues are out on this call right now, don't hate me for saying that, but it's the truth of it. Whatever way you can get in front of a room and talk about that. And often training people, we're pulling you in a classroom. We know you don't want to be here. We're taking you away from your, just opening up and admitting and being authentic about understanding makes a big difference. So I think that whole stage set made a big difference. And also recognizing and saying up front that we know it's not always you. So that was another piece of this. Some of these were some of the pieces in the clips are not rudeness by the person giving the service. It's rudeness by the person standing there asking for the service. So admitting that too, I think, opened them up a lot. It's not just you.
Right. This is a human thing, and we're all in this class going to be human, and that means we've done a thing wrong in the past, and HR is not going to rush in and grab you and take you out of the room gong show style. I almost wish I could have given that to every class, but I couldn't. And like I said, and like many of you experience, when you're doing training for different groups, you have to change your approach. When I moved over to clinical teams, that was not the approach to take. It was very hierarchically minded area. So it was, well, what can we say that will make them comfortable enough to speak without putting them in a position where they are in a bad position? Because we know that not everything they think is not. Some of the things they perceive are real. And were there, when you had groups like that, was everyone in the department in the class, or were managers or anyone kind of higher up in the food chain given a separate class so that everyone could be open?
We discouraged managers from being in that room. Managers were handled separately. Managers went through the same training, but managers also went through a workshop after the training that was about how do you solicit information, how do you talk to people, how do you make them feel safe, how do you be safe, basically, and then how do you run sustainability in a way where you can talk about these things. It helped them a lot from a feedback perspective, because sometimes it's challenging to give feedback, and a lot of them were very, again, stereotypically, wait for the performance review, wait for the quarterly discussion. This forced them to have conversations weekly about service. So where that was important, it became more important. Where we had groups like IT where the leaders were more technically minded and not as concerned about customer service, that's where we actually ended up having our learners bring it more into those meetings, because it was important to them. They're doing the technical work. That's going fine. It's the people work that became challenging. So that was what I saw before I left. Again, lot has happened in the last year and a half. So.
And when you kind of went back and did your own needs analysis, or when you tried to figure out what people actually needed, what, I don't know if you can come up with this off the top of your head, but what was the biggest difference between what eye care was designed for and what your people actually needed?
It was hands-on. I mean, eye care originally, I mean, it was for, I kid you not, hands-on bedside training. How do you deal with, you know, with patients who are having challenges, right? Emotional challenges with what they're dealing with. So, oh, sorry, I think I just lost my lighting. I'm in the dark again. Equipment is so fun, isn't it? But that was really the biggest challenge, was because when they're, you know, folks are looking at this and they're saying, but it doesn't make sense. And so we'd have to say, well, this is how you use that, you know, from that perspective. And like I said, when we started with IT, it was easier, number one, because from a learning perspective, myself and my partner understand the IT role really well. So we were able to sort of help them along in sort of bringing that those clinical examples and saying, what does this mean in your world? So that helped. But then having that IT example that was right from the organization helped it. Like I said, everybody after it. But that was the biggest challenge, you know, the physical. Why is it telling me how to do this? And am I going to help somebody who comes to my desk crying? You know, you're like, don't be so literal. You know, we need to. All right, we're gonna. And actually, eventually, we pulled some of the examples out that were more psychological. That was a big part of that training. Whereas this, I don't want you to psychoanalyze. I don't want you to do those things in here. I just want you to give good service and think about where the person is and try to meet them in that place. So if they're really pissed off, and I'm Susie Sunshine, that's not going to help them. You know, so keep yourself in one place.
When you drilled everything down to the framework of, or the skeleton of what made sense, was that skeleton, it sounds like it was really just based on empathy and coming from things from that place. Is
that's part of it, actually. So that would be part of it. But I mean, also just how do you start a conversation? I mean, eye care itself, and I'm going to trip over myself I'm actually going to look at this. It's been a while since I've looked at this. Eye care. So let me actually pull up the reference. So part of this is about that. So each part of the eye care model, it's initiate, communicate, anticipate, respond, and educate. And there's a piece in every one of these things that's empathy, right? Thinking about, so if you're initiating a conversation, where does the person start, right? You know, what's their energy level coming into the conversation? How do you meet them there? Then from the communicate, you know, like how are you communicating with them, meeting them where they are, anticipating their needs, responding in kind, not in kind like yelling, but you know, responding in a way that helps them know that you're trying to meet their needs. And then educating them. How can they help themselves? So a lot of the questions that we would get, and this actually spanned across areas, they were things people could have actually found for themselves. Very easily, and probably would have saved them a phone call and a lot of headache and stress. So it was, how do you educate the person without being condescending, rude? Not, well, you know, you could have just looked this up, right? I mean, you get that and you see that all the time, especially internally. Well, did you check the Confluence page or whatever it is that they're using?
Right.
There's a better way to do that and to educate somebody. And it's, so that was a big piece of it, but always empathy. Listen, observe.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have the e-learning, the references, your one pager that you were bagging on, and then it saved you. So
yeah,
thank you, one pager.
Oh, thank you, one pager. True. Oh my gosh.
It's actually that brought me back to when I was a customer service representative, and my cube was just plastered with one pagers because I needed to just be able to look up. And, you know, I already had databases and stuff open. So having those references visible for some people, now it's useless for me because I'm, you know, in a different place every day. But when you have a physical desk, those were just invaluable. Just constant Post-its.
Right. Meeting the learner where they are. Exactly. Where I'm so used to a virtual world that I went, really? You want paper? Right. But I'm a remote worker. So different.
Yep. Okay. Oh, Alan and
Yes.
Kara. Okay,
what are those two talking about?
I should also say, if you have any questions, throw them in the question thing. And I had one, but I'll save it for later. Okay, so we have e-learning, we have the workshop, and then sustainability plans. What's going on here?
This is actually, I could say this was the most important part of what we did. Again, this is where we brought the managers in and we made them think. We made them talk. Again, like it says on the screen, we actually started them in a place of possibility, like what is possible. And the main thing that we talked about was how is the skills transfer going to happen, right? So, making sure that they let people know what their expectations were, right? Providing the resources, giving feedback. Incentives was a huge, huge thing. And I find that actually with every client that I work with, I have to say in the last year, they don't think about recognition for the people that are working with the learning team, the subject matter experts that feel their time's taken. Not only the learning team, I mean, that recognition I know is challenging in itself. And it's one of the things as a consultant I experience exactly the same way I did in the company, which is sad because in a company we should be recognized more. As a consultant, they pay me and that's their idea and that's fine, and if they keep me as a consultant ongoing, even better, right? But how do you get them to align the incentives inside the company? And
Sorry, so here you're talking about this is for the managers. And are you aligning the incentives for the managers to take part or for the actual customer service people to do the stuff?
So sorry, I went off on a tangent.
No, that's
actually. So this particular, in this one, the aligning was for the people, for the learners, for the performance. Where my tangent was going was actually thinking of what I'm doing now and what we all do when we're developing a course and we're working with SMEs. So for instance, what I'm developing right now, I have 58 SMEs. 58 SMEs that are like 150% committed without this project, which was an unplanned project that sort of happened to them. And so that was more what I mean around aligning incentives. When I went off on my little tangent, I think it's as learning people to try to bring the leaders back to, are you recognizing the people that are helping us develop? Because they might be resentful. But this is really about learners. Are you doing the right things? And if they are you calling them out? Are you highlighting it? Are you making sure that other people see it? So A, to recognize the person, but B, to proliferate the behavior, to make it keep happening, right? This is good and we're going to recognize that this is good and this person will be rewarded for this. Not the carrot and the stick, but well, someone who is in eye care, right? So if someone's on a call with a challenging member, for instance, and they're able to handle that member, then they get, let's say they determine what the problem is, they find the right person, they transfer the call, and they do this all in a way that is very visible to the people sitting around them. They can hear the person, let's say, screaming on the other end of the phone. All of this. How do you make sure that someone sees that behavior? Besides the people sitting around them. So part of the sustainability plan was when you get into a meeting, let's call people out for the behaviors that they're having. Let's make sure that they have, for instance, IT put in a point system. So they literally were like tracking, hey, you did that. You just anticipated well. And they were actually playing with the idea of that. And they would get into their weekly meetings and they talk about, why does Joe have 5 points this week? Or what was this thing that you did that everybody said was so great? Recognizing in real time. More challenging in a remote environment like my care management people. But when you're in a live sort of call center, which was where the IT group was, that was part of this, it's something that's very easily done.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
No, you did. I just want kind of the recognizing in meetings and the point system's interesting because that's one of those rare examples where like you can really gamify that behavior and that has the intended effect. You're incentivizing the right things by doing that.
If it's the right group. I mean, that would help. Like my IT group loved that. I really don't think, I think that would be sort of, I think for a clinical group, that would be an anti-reward kind of, and primarily because they're remote, it's harder to see it. So people will, automatically people who are louder or more boisterous or putting themselves forward will get recognized, as opposed to, let's say, that shy person who's just doing a great job that nobody sees. So it becomes more challenging. Oh, I think I lost your audio. Maybe? Oh yeah, you're on mute, Kristen. I can see you talking, but I can see your mute button. Am I on mute? I don't think I am. Okay, cool. Thanks, Kara. Keep chatting. Okay, yeah, I'm really good at the chatting part. But yeah, Kristen, I think we lost you. So I'm going to try to carry this. Let's see. Throw anything. Thanks, Kara. My favorite color. I love black. Actually, I really do love black. I'm such a stereotype. Popcorn, and I'm not allowed to eat it anymore, which is really, really awful. But I love popcorn. And yes, black is wonderful. Favorite vacation destination? Hawaii, Maui. Although I probably will never go back. Although I do have an upcoming trip to Ohio. And I keep meaning to reach out to you to see if I can talk you into coffee. Yes. Conference in August. So let's see. We're probably boring everyone else who's not typing in the chat right now. So let's see. Oh wait, I hear her coming back. There she is.
Thank you, Kara.
Kara's awesome.
Okay, so my sound is probably terrible, but that's okay because Lisa can do most of the talking. My battery went low, so I was switching in and out, but I switched the wrong one out apparently.
Well, I should have remembered where we wanted to switch to. I think we wanted to talk a little bit about portfolios.
Well, so I wanted to just talk a little bit about the process of making this, because this serves as part of your portfolio, and you had to get permission to use all of this. So can you just talk about how you approached your company? Because I think that's something that's blocking us a lot to get this stuff. So how did that conversation start? How did it go?
Sure. Well, so actually it wasn't a chat. I made the conversation more challenging than I think it was, than it was in my head. And it was, I had been with the company for a number of years, 10 years, all of my e-learning, frankly, and most of my, anything modern that I had done was really from there. So I went to my OD leader, and I said, hey, I'd like to use some of the work that we've done together. I'm happy to have you approve what I use. Certainly all logos and things like that will come off. And they were actually very amenable to it. I put it together. I had to run it by them, run it by my legal team. And they were fine with it as long as it was shared in a way like this. So when I have clients, I'll share it to them over the phone. Every week I change the password to this page. So I will give it to them so they can actually click on the pieces and look at the pieces. And they only get, by the way, a portion of the pieces. I should actually preface it to say, what you're seeing here are snippets of what we did. So the intro module is in itself, but this is just a piece of the education module. This is one of our models here, again, cleaned out of all logos, all the pieces here, anything that's confidential, strategy. So pieces of this talked about our strategy. We had our strategy map in here. We talked about why we're doing this, whether it was if we were talking to an internal group or an external group, we connected it to the strategy. All of that is gone from these decks. I can talk about it, say why we did it, but I can't show that. So, but like I said, it was actually a lot easier than I had expected. I made sure I was completely set up and clean before I gave them anything. So logos, any of the workbooks that you can click on here, they're 2 or 3 pages. So like a sample page, something like an exercise. That is something very specific and very not related to like a case. So no case studies, nothing like that. I'll talk about those, but not document them here. Same thing with sustainability. You'll notice if, as I click through here, you can't see much here. I've got the slides grayed out. I can talk to these things. These were the important slides that I would want to talk to a client about. This is a snippet of the sustainability plan. There's snippets in here, but again, very small amounts of it, just enough so that I can have a good conversation. I'm very visual. Without this, I think I'd be stuck, frankly. And my OD leader and I had a good enough relationship, and she also knew me well enough to know that I did need the visual. She's like, yeah, I know you. You can talk, but I can't talk without having something to refer to. Because as you've seen, and as I've warned Kristen, I'm all over the place a little bit, but when I can show it, it makes more sense to people, especially also people who are visual.
Yes. No, and this is a great example of a way to do this where you have, one of the things I like the most is that you're showing a program start to finish. So one of the easiest ways to build a portfolio is to do things like, storyline heroes, things like that, where you have a piece of something. And I know there's a conversation about this on Twitter. How do you balance that with showing that you understand the ISD side of things? So you can show that you can do really cool things, but you also need to show that those really cool things speak to a larger narrative and serve a larger purpose. And I think this is a great way to intersperse those, cool things with how they actually are being implemented and what wrapping goes around that to make it into a larger whole.
It helps with clients. I mean, I don't know about you guys that are doing freelancing. I am not having and have never had any luck with any of the freelance sites. Some folks have actually reached out to me that run sites, I guess, or that run small businesses, and then I never hear back from them after like one not doing a job, by the way, after they say, I might have a job for you, and it just doesn't work. And the hardest part about doing it by myself was exactly what you said, not being able to show something from start to finish. And I knew that was going to be my challenge because I hired people to do this work for my team. So when I looked at samples, for instance, I'm pretty critical of those samples, and I want to understand, and if they're not good samples from a, let's say from a graphic or a design perspective, but they're good samples from an instructional perspective, I want to understand why they were shown to me and what part that person did in them, and how they might be able to fit into my team, because we can't all do all things. So I think what this helps me highlight is what I do really well, where I can partner with people as well. And I talk about that, like my e-learning partner. Frankly, I was not as good at e-learning until I worked with this amazing woman who did the e-learning with this and just taught me a lot about economy in what I was doing. Clean e-learning, more modern. And so I like to talk about that with people too, because when I come into companies, they often want me to do a job, but they don't have a learning strategy. They don't have any learning people. They might have some technical writers who do some of this or some of that, but there's no approach to it. And I'm like, I can do this learning for you, and I absolutely will. You're going to pay me, and I'm going to do beautiful learning for you. It's going to be great. But what happens when you need the next thing? And how do you make this consistent, and how do you build a team? And what I always hope to do is to help them build a team that's going to stay there after I go, right? And that's my dream, actually, for my business, really. And I think of that every time I talk to a client and I know I can't help them. Who can help them? And that's why I miss this community so much, because I used to like kind of know the names, and I was starting to get to know things before. But I always think like, who could do this? And as freelancers, we also know sometimes we have no work, and sometimes we're drinking from a fire hose. I also want to connect with people that I can trust to do amazing work. And share that work and those clients with, so that you never have to turn work down, because that's like the worst thing. They don't come back. I'm sorry, I can't help you. Okay, I found somebody else.
Right. Okay, so is there anything else? I think we got most of the pieces of this, so I want to take the last 10 minutes and talk about what you learned. So in this whole thing, we talked a lot about the things that went well. So overall, what do you think went the best?
I think the transition from the e-learning to the live classes and the use of the digital throughout the program, both like before, during, and after, that was what worked the best. So
how did you, you had the videos in the class, in the classroom setting. You had the slides. What other uses of digital assets in the workshop.
We repeated back. So after you went through the workshop, then you also had access to the pieces, the desk reference, which not the digital, but the digital desk reference. And then in there, you could click out to any of the pieces that we use digitally in the workshop. So any of those videos. So we'd find people like watching the videos or sharing them with people who hadn't been through the class. And they're like, oh, what's that? Oh, that class seems, so it was a great way to like promote and market the class. The e-learnings were always available. Once you've taken them once, you were able to access those not in our LMS, but outside of our LMS. We had so we also had a dedicated site, it's a completely different project, so I don't want to off-rail us. But our learning team put together a website where you could get any of our learning content after you had taken like anything in the LMS. You could find that in the page, and which also was tracked, but also additional things, reference material. So digital references like this, where you're not going to put someone through SCORM, grade it, test it. That's not what the purpose is. It's an on-demand piece. So we would create references for each program and land them on that site. So it was a whole digital repository that was a single sign-on. That was one of our challenges, was our LMS was not single sign-on. So when people looked at it and thought, oh, that's mandatory training, and we couldn't get them to go there to consume for themselves. So we created this secondary site as part of our learning system so that we gave them another place where they were just automatically signed in. The tracking minimal, like we weren't tracking scores or anything like that. It was just, how is our content being consumed and how long are people in it, kind of thing.
That it was single sign-on. So was that tied to their records, or was it just kind of Google Analytics?
Not their LMS records. No, it was just Google Analytics, so that we wanted to keep that very separate from the LMS pieces. One of the things I envisioned if I had stayed, and we were talking to a company about the idea of, and I know this group talks about XAPI a lot, and the idea of how do we get a learning record store where we can collect this data and use it differently. Right. But that still seemed very, for that company, even if we were doing that in other places and other industries now, they were still more than 10 years off. Right. I mean, we were still using a 10-year-old LMS. I'm not kidding you.
Okay, so what did not go well?
Well, you know what, the worst part, or the thing that went the worst, I think, was, and again, this is so common, certainly for me in learning projects, so our deadline never moved. So even though our team came into this more than halfway through, the deadline remained the same. And that was a challenge on a lot of levels, working with subject matter experts, because we were rushing them, we were rushing ourselves. We didn't have enough resources, very normal stuff. So while we're building this great customer service program and trying to teach people how to behave internally, there was a lot of bad behavior in building the program and in the way people were reacting to the drain on their time. Not unfounded bad behavior, by the way. When I say that, I don't mean they were awful SMEs. And no, I mean, they were 100+% committed, and here we're coming along and saying, well, you have to do all this, as were we. So there were a lot of 60 to 80 hour work weeks between my team getting different pieces of it done. So I would say the project management, not because anyone was awful at it, but because we weren't given enough time to do it. So again, stereotypical to an organization, planning. Planning was the worst part. And because of that, managers, when we got to that piece for managers and the sustainability, were exhausted, burnt out, frustrated. And that's why I tend to wonder how it's sustained past, I left, my partner left 6 months later. I wonder if it was upkept, or if it really became something that happened that was amazing for a point in time, and then, like a lot of corporate programs, got dropped. So I think that was the worst part of it, the nature of it. And I think the lack of planning is what could have caused it to fail long term. Right.
So when you're doing those project risks, that was one that you couldn't, you can't really come back from that. You can just, you can't, it's not a failure of project management to not be able to manage a completely impossible timeline. And that's something that I think we forget, and we put on project managers when we shouldn't. A project manager of the Titanic can't do all that much.
Exactly. So exactly. Why didn't you get the ship to turn? Right. Why didn't you think of that? Yeah.
They might as well just rearrange the deck chairs, because then they look busy.
exactly.
Oh,
And that
there's
is
value.
exactly, that is such a great metaphor, Kristen, actually. They made, how many times are we managing a project as learning people and we're asked, what are the hours that are going to be needed for this? Or what are the hours for your SMEs for that? So you stop working. I actually told a client recently, I said, I can absolutely rescope that for you. I need 7 hours of rescoping time. So that's 7 hours I can't work, which puts us 7 more hours behind the 2 weeks we're already behind. How would you like me to handle that?
Yep.
I did the rescope. You
Yep.
know, you do what the client asks for and you do your best to get it done on time and not stress out.
Right.
Best thing about being a freelancer, you do stress out less, probably more about money, but less about how your clients are behaving. Because at the end of the day, you know you can fire them if you really want to and have to.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, Kara said all too often they want a magical number.
Of course they do. And then they see the real number and they freak out.
Yeah. Every number sounds scary in a project. Every estimate of hours, of price, every number is scary.
Even to you guys, right? Even to you, and Kristen. So, when I look at those numbers, I like go 236 hours, seriously? I actually pay more attention to how many hours are in a day now that I'm a freelancer than I ever did before. I never realized it, but when you're trying to get 8 or 10 hours in a day because you know you need to, and then you start thinking about your time for cooking or taking a walk, and you're like, oh my God, there really is no time.
Yep. Oh yeah, my life is lived by what places have wireless.
Yes.
And then I manage my work around it. Mm-hmm. My sushi lunch, I can't get Wi-Fi. I sometimes get the McDonald's Wi-Fi, but very rarely. So I have to have everything queued up to do writing during lunch because that's what I know I need to do. Okay, so what have you taken away from this and applied? It seems like this is me psychoanalyzing. It seems like you have a renewed interest in the longevity of projects after you leave.
Yeah.
And is that stemming a little bit from this?
I've always been interested in the sustainability part. I can't say that I haven't, but I think what I have learned on top of that is not to overplan. So what I just talked about those planning hours and what I said to that last client, yes, I can do this. It's going to take me 7 hours to rescope it. I understand how long it takes to scope things, but I think I understand at a new level agile project management and agile learning development. I think I was still trying to overplan it. It's going to take this many hours, and that's where we are. You know, at the end of the day, it takes more or less time than that, and it's not that important as long as you sort of have an idea of how long, you know, of how you can get it done, if that makes sense. But not to be so focused on, are the hours exactly right? For instance, if I'm timing a course, am I going to sit and watch every video start to finish and spend an hour to make sure that it's actually an hour? Or am I going to go, it's 30-minute video? I think that takes 10 or 20 minutes to read. Right. Sort of things like that I'm learning to shortcut that I never wanted to. I think that's what I took from this, is not to over architect, to make sure it's sustainable and simple. That would be the biggest part of this, because this would have been so easy to over-engineer, so easy. And we struggled, and that was again where my partner helped me. We helped each other. I brought sort of her game up in one area and she brought my game up in another, and it was a good mix. So partners and second eyes are always important, even when you're a freelancer. That's what I take into this year. I always have people look at my stuff before it goes to the client. I mean, even if that means, you know, an hourly rate, that's okay. It's fine. You know, we talk about what that is and how many hours it'll be, but my eyes are not going to see everything.
That is a very good thing to remember and to leave it on. Where can people find you?
So I am probably the best to find on LinkedIn. I try to come into TLDC at 11. It's 11 o'clock because I'm on the East Coast. So it's a little bit challenging. So hopefully you'll see me pop in more than I have been the last few weeks as things calm down here and I become more broke. But LinkedIn's the best way to get me. I'm not really good on Twitter, and I'm going to still try with Slack, but I've tried it a few times, and as a few people can tell you, it's been abysmal. So yeah, LinkedIn, email me, check out my website, and send me contact through there. I check my regular email every day, and actually I'm going to look down and throw my email. For some reason, my mouse won't go down there. I'm going to throw my email in the chat you can always email me. Just please don't spam me. And I just put that in the chat. And so I always see that one because I am almost always working.
Perfect. Yep. That's the stress-free life of a freelancer.
Exactly. It's even on my phone, and I refused to do that for my day job before, but I made them their own phone, but now I actually have my work email on my phone.
Yep. Well, thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
you taking the time. I really appreciate everyone for joining and jumping in.
Everyone. Thanks for making it painless.
Sorry?
Thanks for making it painless. This is my first video webcast, so I'm training. Like, I've done a lot of web training, but like you said earlier, they only see me for a few minutes, so that's easier.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, you did a wonderful job. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.